Hey everybody, welcome to the videos where I'm breaking down the Goodyear 400 at Darlington Raceway, aka the track too tough to tame, the Lady in the Black, whatever you want to call it. It'll be on Sunday, May 9th at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And just from a fan standpoint, obviously I'm excited about this from a DFS perspective, but just as a fan, I typically like the races at Darlington, so I'm looking forward to the race this weekend. We have the throwback paint schemes, which are always fun to look at. We had 3 races at Darlington last year. I'm pretty sure I enjoyed all of them from what I can remember. I think there were some pretty good races. And now we're in the 750 horsepower package compared to the 550. And I think the majority of people that do enjoy watching NASCAR or just NASCAR fans in general do prefer that short track aero package. So I think it's going to be another plus for this weekend. Also, Darlington's a very unique track, shaped like an egg. There's high tire wear. So the racing should be pretty good on Sunday, and I am looking forward to it. And I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. My NASCAR community does a fantastic job interacting with my content, so I do appreciate that. And if you're brand new to the channel, if you're just a returning viewer that hasn't already, please hit that subscribe button, because 50% of the people that watch these videos every single week have not yet done that. And if you don't follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and cpenn16 over on IG. Now, I don't post much fantasy stuff on my Instagram, but I do post more personal stuff. So if you want to see what I'm eating, playing video games, all that fun stuff, you can find it on my Instagram. And I'm also graduating on Saturday and going to Florida on Monday. So I should have some pretty fun pictures to post on Instagram throughout the weekend. So if you want to hit me a follow, now might be a good time to do that. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, join the community of several hundred members. Link is down below for that. And we have an awesome community. I mean, I don't really know, I'm not really part of any other communities, but I have a hard time seeing us have a better NASCAR DFS community. A lot of cool people in there. We have several hundred people, and you get access to projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, the Discord community, which is absolutely awesome. I love everybody in there. Everyone's cool. It's mostly jokes in there, but we do talk some NASCAR DFS as well. And race days are super fun in there. I wouldn't want to hang out in any other place. So everyone in there does make it a really fun time, and you get access into the entire spreadsheet and the optimizer, like I already mentioned, which you can build 150 lineups, set groups, exposures, and I'll have my own personal exposures and my own ownership projections, which have been pretty good so far this season. We've had multiple people take down multiple tournaments so far this year, so if you want to try it out, link is down below for that. It's still the beginning of the month, so it's still one of the best times to sign up, and I got a lot of content in there, including the articles and everything on the spreadsheet, which has about 20-some tabs here with a chock full of information. So if you want to support the channel, link is down below for that to join the community. But I think that's kind of it for the plug. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this week's race. And before we get into the actual preview portion of this video, as per usual, I got to go over some housekeeping things. So number one, the live stream this weekend, I'm thinking around 2 p.m. Eastern is probably a good time to have it. Race starts around, what, 3:30, 3:45. So 2 p.m. is probably a good time to go live and answer some questions. And if you guys have never been to the live stream, it's a really fun time. I mean, we don't really do anything serious in there, just answering questions for the most part, chilling before the race, hanging out, answering funny questions, just talking. Kind of just a fun way to interact with you guys, because I say everything serious that I want to say in this video that you're watching right now. Then the live stream is just kind of a fun thing to do before race day, so I do enjoy those. So come and check it out if you never have done that. I do appreciate all the donators in there as well. We had quite a few of those last week, so shout out to you guys. And if you want to join the DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week on this channel, all you gotta do is comment your DK username down below, say something nice with it, whatever you want to do, don't really care. But the first about 100 people that accept the invite will be able to join the contest, and it typically fills pretty quick, a couple hours before lock, so make sure you get your usernames down below so I can send you the invite and you can join the contest. Just a fun way for me to interact with you guys, see what lineups you're building and all of that fun stuff. And you get a free shout out on the channel if you do finish inside the top 3, and I guess kind of the top 10. I do talk about the people that bubbled the contest as well, and you can win some money too, so I think everyone enjoys that. But throw the winners on the screen right about now. And coming in first place, taking home the gold and around $100-some, we had JPool88 coming in at 356.5 points. And the people that finished inside the podium this week, the top 3, they killed the competition. They all scored around 30-some more points than everybody else. So shout out to you 3. Then with the game 2169 coming in second. Then Gilbert 103 with 342 points coming in third with the bronze medal. Then people on the bubble here, fourth place, we had Countenheimer. Fifth place, Jesus Saves 2014, Maverick 11. Bulldog 33. Wade coming in 8th, DLM, bunch of numbers in 9th. And yours truly, I finally finished inside the top 10 in my contest. Feels like a long time coming, but at least I was able to get my name on the screen finally. But shout out to everybody, and a double shout out to the people inside the top 3. You absolutely killed it this week. So if you want to join the contest, all you gotta do is leave that DK username down below, and I'll happily send you that invite. But I think that's it for the housekeeping. So without further ado, let's get into the preview portion of this race. And as previously mentioned, this is the Goodyear 400 at Darlington Raceway, and there's your outline of the track. And as you can see, it is kind of shaped like an egg, smaller at the bottom, It's a little bit bigger up top. It's a steep, high tire wear, unique track for the most part. And if you're looking for comparable tracks, it's kind of hard to because Darlington is pretty unique, but I think tracks like Homestead, Dover, and Auto Club would be somewhat similar for the most part. So those are kind of like the similar tracks I'm looking at, but it's still a pretty unique track. So I do want to focus more so on track history here compared to most things, but I will be adding some other tracks and tracks that we've ran the short track aero package in there as well, because I do think it's all somewhat reliable to kind of count on this weekend. It's 1.366 miles in length, 293 laps, which means we have 205.1 Dominator points available, which means Dominator points are going to be pretty important this week. Last week we had 267 laps and we still wanted 2 to 3 Dominators. Now with 293, 2 to 3 Dominators is still going to be the way to go. Looking at previous optimal lineups, that's typically what you see at a track like Darlington, so I don't think that's going to change for me this weekend. Also, something to keep in mind, if you're looking at last year's races, we ran a different aero package. It was the 550, now we're in the 750, so if you want to look at how drivers have ran the short track aero package, you can certainly do that. The only problem is a lot of those races are short, flat tracks for the most part, so and Darlington's definitely not a flat track, so that kind of throws in a wrench in some things, but you can look at tracks like Dover, you can even throw Bristol in there, but for the most part, Darlington is very unique. You want to look at how drivers have performed at Darlington. I'm also throwing in numbers from like Homestead. You could even throw in Atlanta because it's a high tire wear track. Auto Club in Dover, it's also a smaller, steep track, so I think that's a comparable track to Darlington, but for the most part, very unique track, and drivers that typically do well at Darlington are going to see that once again because it's usually the same kind of drivers up front almost every single time. But with that being said, I think that's it for the preview, so let's get into everyone's favorite part of the video, the driver-by-driver breakdown. And just for my overall thoughts on the pricing this weekend, I think they did a fine job. I don't think the Dominators are underpriced for the most part. I think they got it right. Maybe besides Chase Elliott, he might be a bit too cheap here, but besides that, I think DraftKings did a pretty good job. The cheap guys are priced appropriately. I would say the mid-range guys are as well, so no real complaints there. And Kyle Larson is the most expensive driver, which should definitely be the case. And getting into that, Kyle Larson, $11,400. He's the most expensive driver on the slate, starting back in 14th. Unfortunately, we don't have a bunch of place differential guys like we did last week, so it's not just as easy to lock and load them that we're starting in the rear because we're going to get those automatic place differential points, so you got to think about it a little bit more this week. But Larson offers us the most place differential of any Dominator this week, and he's also pretty much the best driver at Darlington. Now, looking at his sample size, it's only the past 3 races compared to the past 6 compared to the other drivers because he obviously didn't race last season and we had 3 races at Darlington, so you got to take that into equation. But in those 3 races, he averaged nearly 100 DraftKings points per race, 6.3 average finish, 3.7 running position, which is the best of all drivers, the best driver rating, didn't pick up a win, but 150.7 laps led and 55.7 fast laps. This is a very good track for Darlington. At Darlington, you want to ride around the wall. That's the fastest way around the track, and Kyle Larson obviously has no issues with that whatsoever, and the 5 car has just been amazing this year. And keep in mind, those numbers were in the 42 car. The 5 car, pretty much the best car in the field in 2021. I know he's dominated a few races and hasn't came out with victories in all of them, but if that happens again, even then, he should be fine. I would have a hard time seeing Kyle Larson not come out and dominate this race. I think he could easily lead 100-plus laps. I know he's had a couple struggles in the 750 horsepower package so far this season, but some of that's from bad luck. I know the one time, I think it was at Richmond, where his car was just complete junk all day after they went down pit road. I think they put a Packard adjustment, something like that in there, kind of killed the car. And I'm not really working out. Then Phoenix, he drove through the field so many times, just couldn't get up front because he had to keep going to the rear. Martinsville, he was fine there as well, so I don't really have any concerns there. In the 550, he's obviously been the best driver this year, has a ton of speed. Saw that last week. Now in the 750, they ran that here back in 2018, nearly led 300 laps in that race. So I am all about Kyle Larson. I will play him in cash games. I will play him in tournaments. I will play him just about everywhere. I'll be playing him in my YouTube contest. I love Kyle Larson this week, and I didn't think he was going to be that high owned last week. He was around 50% owned, so if we see similar ownership, I want to be like way over that this week. And I hate going that far in a driver, but the stars are aligning for Kyle Larson this week. The only way it's not going to work out, I think, is if he wrecks or something or has a bunch of issues on pit road, but I am willing to take the chances with that because if it's a clean race, Kyle Larson should absolutely smash the field here, so he's the favorite in Vegas for a reason. Sign me up for all the Kyle Larson I can handle in any single format on Sunday. And with that being said, Joey Logano, $11,100. He's a good play as well. But if I'm going to be really in on Kyle Larson this week, I'm going to have a hard time playing both him and Logano together. So Logano's naturally going to be lower owned for me. I don't think he's a bad play by any means. And I think going to the 750 Aero package is going to be a good thing for Logano because he's been one of the best drivers in the COVID era in that aero package. Like, just looking at the numbers specifically in the 750, I can pull it over here, just not even looking at Darlington, but specifically in this aero package, he's averaging 64.1 DraftKings points per race, which is the most of any driver. Best running position, best driver rating, has a win, 8 top 5s, which is tied for the most, some of the most laps led and fast laps. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these numbers are from short flat tracks, which obviously Darlington isn't really much of a short flat track by any means at all. It's very steep and very unique, and definitely not like a track like Martinsville or anything like that. But specifically in this aero pack, which does include races from Dover and Bristol, Logano just have the best numbers overall, but he's fine at Darlington. Just not typically a big dominator, only averaging around 6.2 laps led per race and 7.2 fast laps. And look, when I'm playing Kyle Larson, I want to pair him up with someone closer to the front. So that'd be someone like a Chase Elliott, a Kevin Harvick, a Kyle Busch, a Keselowski, a Truex, or a Hamlin. So I'll have some Logano in probably the lineups that I don't have Kyle Larson, or just if I want to get a little bit different. But I'm not loving Logano here just because of the price point. He's priced right beside Larson. Like I mentioned, I want all the Larson I can handle this week, so I'll just naturally be a little bit lower on Joey. Not to say he's a bad play. That's just how it's going to have to work out roster construction-wise because of the price point. But if you guys are looking for a contrarian play, I'd imagine Joey Logano will have some decent little ownership because I don't think many people are going to be super high on Joey this weekend. And going on to Denny Hamlin here, $10,600. I could see the Hamlin combination being very popular this weekend. It's definitely one I can get behind, but Hamlin's been great at Darlington, one of his better racetracks. He has 2 wins here recently, 3 top 5s. He's been a lap leader. He's been a fast lap guy. He won here last year, which I know is in a different aero package, so I don't want to compare last season to this year too much, but it's still Darlington, and I'd expect a very strong day from Denny Hamlin. He's also good in this aero package. If we want to look at his numbers at these specific track types, he's averaging 59.6 DraftKings points per race, which I'm including races from Homestead, Darlington, Dover, Auto Club. In these sample sizes, he has 3 wins, which is tied for the most with Kevin Harvick. Some of the most laps led, some of the most fast laps, and looking specifically in this aero package, 63.8 DraftKings points per race, which is only behind Joey Logano. He's got a win, 6 top 5s, the most laps led per race, and the most fast laps. So I'm a huge fan of Denny Hamlin this week. I would say one of my favorite dominator plays on the entire slate. Probably number 2 right behind Kyle Larson for me this weekend. Martin Truex Jr., $10,300. He's starting in 4th. Love the price point here. Now, finish-wise, this hasn't been the greatest track for him. In the past 6 races, he has 0 top 5s and only 3 top 10s, but he has been a lap leader here, 53 laps led per race and 34.2 fast laps. He's also pretty much been the best driver in this aero package so far this season. We know Truex is very good at the shorter tracks. The finishes are going to come for him. I think the no top 5s recently is going to keep people off of Truex, but even then, he's still averaging 60.8 DraftKings points per race here, which is still top 5 of all drivers recently. So I wouldn't let the lack of good finishes scare you off of Truex because that price point's really nice, and the way he's been running in this aero package, I don't see why that would change. So I'm definitely in on Truex here. He's got one of the best driver ratings in the entire field. I believe 3rd best, only behind Kevin Harvick and Kyle Larson. So you can sign me up for the Truex at that price point. Starting 4th, there's definitely a decent chance he could lead laps early on. So I'm definitely in on Truex because of that price tag. I think you could play him in cash games if you can't quite afford Denny Hamlin for $300 more. Then rounding out the $10,000 and up range, we have Brad Keselowski in the pool at $10,000 even. Last time we were in this aero package at Darlington, he won a race here, so I think that's another positive for him. And we saw last week he was able to hang on to the lead from the pole, which rostering the pole sitter in the COVID era has always been a bit of a scary thing, but it was nice to see Keselowski be able to hold on to the lead. Now, was he the best driver to roster last week? No, there were still some other guys like obviously Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch ended up doing better, but Keselowski was definitely not a bad play by any means. It's just he offers, place differential upside, and if he happens to lose the lead early on, it's just there's just so much downside now rostering the pole sitter these days, because I could easily see a guy like Kevin Harvick or Kyle Busch or Denny Hamlin or Martin Truex grabbing the lead early on. You could also throw William Byron in there as well with how good he looked at Homestead using the same tire combination they're using this weekend. So I'm a little bit scared for Keselowski here. Definitely not my favorite dominator play, but he is in the best position to do that. He's been good at Darlington in the past, has a win on the pole. I mean, there's an easy path to dominating. I just worry, anything can happen after that competition caution. If he doesn't unload fast, I mean, it's just downhill from there from Brad Keselowski, especially if he never gets back up front. So I'm not going to be super high on Keselowski, but I'm obviously going to play him because he's the pole sitter. If he happens to lead the entire first stage, yeah, I'm going to want him in my lineups. I just prefer drivers like Truex, maybe even Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin this week over a guy like Brad Keselowski, but I still think he's a fine play nonetheless. In this specific aero package, Keselowski's been one of the best drivers, tied for the most wins at 3 with Martin Truex Jr., one of the best running positions, one of the best driver ratings, 7 top 5, some of the most laps led, and some of the most fast laps. So I like So Keselowski in this air package has definitely been money. I do get a little bit concerned about about Roush on the pole sitter because there's so many other good drivers right beside him. I should also mention Brad Keselowski's been without his main crew chief this week, so that might throw a wrench into some things as well. Not something that really concerns me too much because Keselowski's got so much experience. I don't really think it matters too much, but just want to throw that out there for people that are wondering. Then dropping down to the 9K range, we have Kyle Busch, $9,800 starting in third. Like the price point. I actually won a race last week, which is nice to see. And it's kind of funny how things work where Kyle Busch was only $8,600. It's the cheapest I can ever remember him being. And then he comes out, makes it out the lineup, wins the race, and dominates. Didn't really dominate. Only led like 20-some laps. But he had a really good car. It's just funny how that works. DraftKings prices him all the way down, then he has his breakout race. But I can get behind a little bit of Kyle Busch here. Besides that one bad finish last year, I believe it was the first race where he finished 26th. This has been a very good track for him. Finishes a 7th, 2nd, 26th, 3rd, 7th, and 2nd. So I think the win should lead to some more momentum for Kyle Busch, and it seems like he's had more speed this season. He's definitely been getting some pretty good finishes, and getting the win, the monkey off the back, was definitely a big thing for him. So I'll get a little bit of Kyle Busch in tournaments. Definitely not one of my favorite dominator plays, but just because of the price point below $10,000, he is starting close to the front. He could be one of those guys that does lead laps early on, so I'll definitely have some Kyle Busch because of that, but definitely not one of my favorite dominators on the entire slate. But this has been a pretty solid track for him, even though there hasn't been any wins recently for him. Kevin Harvick, $9,600. He's starting in second. If you're purely looking at track history, he'd have to be one of your favorite plays because of how good he's been at Darlington. And with Darlington being a very unique track, it's kind of hard to overlook these numbers despite his struggles so far this season. But it seems like he's been getting more speed recently. So that's another positive thing for Kevin Harvick here. But just looking at the track numbers, 3.7 average finish, best in the field, running position of 6.6, one of the best driver ratings, 2 wins, 5 top 5s. He's been a main lap leader here. He was fantastic here last season, was a dominator. And if we look at the loop data, just specifically from Darlington last season, looking at just some of the overall best numbers, or best drivers, I should say, at this track. So finish-wise, I'll sort it by that. Kevin Harvick had an average finish of 1.7 at Darlington last year. Was 67 laps led total, which I believe was second only behind Martin Truex Jr., 35 fast laps, which was only behind Martin Truex, and then he also had the best driver rating as well at 125.6. Now you got to keep in mind, different aero package, and obviously Stewart-Haas cars have definitely lost their advantage that they had last season, more so specifically Kevin Harvick rather than the other guys. So there's definitely some concerns to be had here, but Kevin Harvick is just so good at Darlington. It's a very unique track, so typically the drivers that are just good at Darlington are going to be good here unless they were in different equipment like Eric Jones, which, like, if you're looking at his numbers, you think he's an absolute auto play, but we'll get into why he's certainly not an auto play this weekend, starting in 26 and only $8,200. But I do like some Kevin Harvick this week. I will have a decent chunk of him, I think. At some point, he's going to break out, and I think this could be one of those weeks. I feel like he's been close. He's getting closer, and what better track for him to break out than Darlington? I know there's other good tracks that he's really good at, like Phoenix and Atlanta, but Darlington has been a very good track for him as well. So I can get behind some Kevin Harvick this week. Starting in second, if Keselowski doesn't unload fast, maybe Kevin Harvick's the guy that leads the early portion of this race, maybe a good chunk of stage 1. And if that's the case, at $9,600, you're going to want him in some lineups. Not sure I'd go there in cash games. I mean, you could certainly go the Kevin Harvick, Kyle Larson route. I wouldn't be against that, but I feel like right now, because he's going to have to prove it to us, he can be a dominator, that I feel like he's more of a tournament play rather than a cash play for certain, because it's just hard to trust the lack of speed that they've had this season. While I think they're getting closer, I'm still not willing to put him in my cash game lineups, but I do think he's a solid tournament play. And dropping down Alex Bowman here, $9,400. I think you can make a case for playing him in cash games. Not sure you'll quite get the Bowman because you're probably rostering a guy like Larson with a Truex this week, or not saying you have to roster him with Truex, but just for an example, more of a 10K driver. That might make more sense to lock in those early dominator points. I'm not sure if you want to get a Alex Bowman in there as well, but if you can, started 19th. He was actually pretty good at Darlington last year. Besides that one 18th place finish, he finished 6th and 2nd, and also the Hendrick cars overall. Again, different aero package this year, so I hate to put too much into it, but the Hendrick cars were really strong last year. Jimmy Johnson and William Byron were both running up front. They ended up wrecking out in their first race. I think it was the second race where Chase Elliott could have won, but then Kyle Busch ended up wrecking him. I want to say he was in second place, and that's where we got the funny picture of Chase Elliott, giving Kyle Busch a nice thumbs up, if that's what you want to call it. That's what I use for the weather. Anytime there's weather, I use that as my meme over on Twitter. But yeah, I like Alex Bowman. He was really good at Darlington last year, and he's been fine at Auto Club, which I would say is a halfway comparable track to it because it's higher tire wear. Also, he won the Richmond race this year, which is a short track aero package run, and he was really fast at Martinsville, which also uses that similar package. Now, you got to keep in mind those were flat tracks, and this is definitely not a flat track, so it's kind of hard to draw too many comparisons there. But I think Alex Bowman's a guy that has top 5 upside almost every single race because he's looked really fast in that 48 car. So if you want to play him in cash games, I wouldn't really be too against it, even though his track history overall at Darlington hasn't exactly been the greatest with an average finish of 13.4, running position outside the top 10. But he's been looking really strong this year, and I assume that's going to keep continuing. Chase Elliott, $9,200. He's starting in 6th. It's going to be really hard not to play a lot of Chase Elliott this week because that is such a low price point for him. This has to be the lowest I've seen him in quite some time. And he honestly could have won one of those Darlington races last year, but like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure it was Kyle Busch. I forget the incident exactly, but I know he got wrecked, and he honestly could have won that race. Probably would have, actually. But $9,200 for a potential dominator, you can sign me up for all the Chase Elliott. He had 2 really bad finishes last year, 20th and 38th, but he did finish 4th in the first race, and this also has a 5th place finish mixed in there as well. And we know dating back to last season, he's been one of the best drivers in this short track aero package. So I like Chase Elliott a lot, $9,200. You could make a case for playing him in cash games. If you want to go Elliott and Larson just to free up some money as your second dominator, not necessarily in the cards. I wouldn't say Chase Elliott's my most preferred early dominator. I think guys like Keselowski, Truex, and Hamlin are more likely to lead laps early on, but Chase Elliott will certainly be in the mix. And at that price point, if he can pick up fast laps and get like a top 2, top 3 finish, obviously if he competes for the win and dominates, he'll be an excellent play at $9,200. More than likely make the optimal lineup, but $9,200 is a really nice price point for a guy that you wouldn't be very shocked finishing inside the top 5. So I like Chase Elliott purely because of that price. Then Ryan Blaney, $9,000. He's starting in 16th. It hurt last week when he wrecked on the last lap, and I wouldn't say he wrecked. Kyle Larson kind of wrecked him, which sucked because he was one of my drivers I was most overweight on, and he was in 2nd place at the time, or whatever it was in the restart. I know he restarted 2nd, I believe that's what it was, and then at the restart kind of just mumble-jumbled everything up. Then Kyle Larson ended up turning him, which I think he was at 54 points, ended up with 14 maybe. I think, yeah, 14. Sucked because I was pretty heavy on him, and he was actually decently low and below 20%, so that was quite unfortunate. And just to show you guys I'm not biased, I don't like Ryan Blaney this week. I think starting 16th, that's not terrible because I feel like he could obviously be a top 10 guy, but he is not good at Darlington at all. Like, he has 0 top 10s the past 6 races here, obviously 0 top 5s, and only 2 top 15 finishes. This is a terrible track for Ryan Blaney, and as I was mentioning earlier, this is a very unique track, and typically the guys that are good at Darlington are just going to keep riding up front, and the guys that aren't good at Darlington, they're probably going to finish where they usually do, and Ryan Blaney's just not good here. Average, it's not like he's getting unlucky either. He has an average finish, which is right on par with his average running position of 19.9, average finish of 20th, averaging 16.5 DraftKings points per race with a 71 driver rating, 0 laps led, few fast laps mixed in, but looking at the finishes, 24th, 21st, 16th, 13th, 15th, 31st, the guy is just not good at Darlington. He's pretty much good at most every single track, but tracks like Richmond and Darlington are just not good tracks for him. So if you want to fade Ryan Blaney this week, I have no issue with that at all. I know he's cheap. I know he's starting mid-pack, so he's going to look like a decent halfway kind of place differential guy. I mean, 16 is not really a major place differential, but for a guy like Blaney, you'd typically view that as place differential, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes right around where he's starting. So I'm not a fan of Ryan Blaney this week. I think he's a pretty strong fade candidate. Dropping down to the 8K range here of William Byron, $8,800. He's starting in 5th, and I think he's a very interesting tournament play, and I'm hoping he goes a bit overlooked because when you're starting around guys named like Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex, Denny Hamlin, William Byron's going to be one of those guys that gets a bit overlooked, but I like the price point here. And last year at Darlington, he had a really fast car in one of the races and ended up wrecking, and I know his numbers at Darlington aren't overall fantastic, but we're using the same tire combination that we did at Homestead, and if you guys remember Homestead, I think William Byron scored around 100 DraftKings points in that race. He ended up winning, dominating, had a really strong car, and look, Darlington, I would say, is a similar track to Homestead, and I wouldn't be surprised if William Byron can stay within the top 5, pick up some fast laps, maybe get up front at some point. So I do like Byron quite a bit in tournaments, and I think for the most part we should all be rooting for William Byron this week. We just found out that his mom, I believe, has a brain tumor, so if you just want this feel-good story, I'd really like William Byron to come out here and pick up the win, just for that, just to make everyone feel better. So I am rooting for William Byron because of that this week. Not saying he's a good DFS play by any means like that. I don't want to diminish that. I'm just saying it'd be a nice feel-good story if William Byron could come out, pick up a win for his mom, because that's some awful news, and obviously no one ever wants to hear that. So I am rooting for William Byron this week, and just from a DFS perspective, I do think he's a pretty strong tournament play because of what we saw at Homestead. I think he can definitely have a pretty strong race here, and he's been a top 10 machine. Was it now 8 or 9 races in a row? He just keeps picking up top 10s, and I don't think that's going to change, and it might be time to start viewing him as a top shelf driver. Obviously, he's in great equipment in the Hendrick car, but he's just so young, it's kind of hard to picture him with guys like Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, but he's been driving very, very well this season. Christopher Bell here, I think he's a fine place differential play. You could roster him in cash games or tournaments, but if he can put up the numbers that Eric Jones did in this 20 car at Darlington, I mean, it should be a very good day for Christopher Bell. He's also been fine in this aero package as well, but if you want to look at Eric Jones' numbers in the 20 car, he finished no worse than 8th in his career there, had an average finish of 5.2, running position of 8.7, had a win, 4 top 5s, and obviously in the top 10 each and every single time with specific finishes of 4th, 5th, 8th, 1st, 8th, and 5th place. So not saying they're the exact same kind of drivers, and Darlington's more of like a skills unique track, so I'm not saying it's going to exactly translate to Christopher Bell just because he's in the 20 car, but we know that 20 car definitely has a lot of potential here, and if we're looking at Bell's numbers last season at Darlington, you really can't put too much into it because he was driving the 95 car, which is definitely not right up to par with that 20 car. We did have an 11th place finish mixed in there, and I feel like he can definitely build upon that in his new JGR car this year, so definitely a big fan of Christopher Bell. I think he can be a very strong play. $8,600 might be a bit expensive for me, and for $200, we could get a potential dominator here in William Byron, but I'm definitely going to have some Christopher Bell exposure this week because he can realistically gain us close to 10 to 15 spots if all goes well. So I do like Bell. Kurt Busch, $8,400. This is another very good track for him, kind of similar to Eric Jones, where he just has some really strong numbers here. Looking at his specific finishes, 8th, 15th, 3rd, 7th, 6th, 3rd. So if you take that 15th place finish out for Kurt Busch, kind of has similar numbers to Eric Jones, where he didn't finish worse than 8th recently. So you can sign me up for some Kurt Busch starting 17th. Feel like he might go a little bit overlooked because he's priced right in between Christopher Bell and Eric Jones, and I think people looking at track history are just going to play Eric Jones this week, which I totally get, but you guys got to keep in mind he's in the 43 car now, which sucks. So we're, instead of like top 5 upside, we're probably looking at top 15 upside here for Eric Jones, but I can definitely get on some Kurt Busch because I know he's not like an amazing place differential play in 17th, but he's got an average finish of 7th here with 2 top 5s and 5 top 10s, and Kurt Busch is just kind of a machine here at Darlington, and I don't see why that's going to change here. So I do like Kurt Busch quite a bit. Eric Jones, $8,200 starting in 26. So like I already mentioned, I'm not going to go over it again, but this is a very, very good track for Eric Jones. Pretty much his best track in the entire series. And the problem is he's now in the 43 car. Now, if you want to look what Bubba did in the 43 car at Darlington, not that great of numbers at all. So I definitely have some concerns. He finished 38th in the last race, so I'm not going to really count that. But 16th, 21st, 24th, and 26th. Eric Jones, I would say, is a better driver than Bubba Wallace. I think Eric Jones will be putting up much better numbers in the 23 car than Bubba Wallace is. So Eric Jones' upside this week, I would say, is probably a top 15 finish. We have seen him finish 10th before and a couple finishes up there, so I'm not thinking it's out of the equation. Obviously, this car is limiting his upside by a lot, so do not expect old Eric Jones Darlington numbers to appear this week because I just don't think that's realistic in the car that he's in now, but he could gain around 10 spots in this race, which is not terrible at $8,200. I wish he was a bit cheaper. It's kind of hard to want to roster him when we know his upside's around 15th some place. But I do think he's a relatively safe play. He's just a very skilled driver here at Darlington, so hopefully he can use that to his advantage and pick up a good finish compared to what he usually does in this 43 car for Richard Petty Motorsports. Then Eric Almirola, $8,000. He's starting in 27th. This is an okay track for him. We just have a couple top 10s, 4 top 15s, but the thing I'm most interested in, he's actually been pretty good in this car in the short track aero package for Stewart-Haas Racing. Like if we look at his numbers specifically in the 750 horsepower package, average finish of 13.2 with a running position of 12.8. He has a top 5, 7 top 10s, 9 top 15s, and 11 top 20s. Starting all the way back in 27th for a guy that's got an average finish of 13th here, he could seriously gain us around 10 to 15 spots and at only $8,000. I do think he's a pretty strong cash game play this week, and looking at his numbers last year at Darlington, he finished 9th, 7th, and 12th. I think there's some upside here for Almirola, and I think he's a relatively pretty safe play this week, so I could definitely get on some Almirola ownership at only $8,000. Feel like he's a relatively safe play for the most part. Dropping down to the 7K range here, we have MDB at $7,800. He's starting in 8th. I mean, he's okay at Darlington. He does have 2 top 10 finishes and 3 top 15s. It's just that starting spot makes him a very iffy play. I'll probably have a little bit of him in tournaments in case he can hold that top 10 spot and maybe pick up I'd even take an 8th place finish, $7,800. It's not bad for finishing position point potential. And looking at his numbers at Darlington, they're really not that bad. Even when he was in the absolute junk box in the 95, I wouldn't say it's the worst car out there, but it's definitely not up to par with the 21 car. And the same goes for Christopher Bell. He was in the 95 car before, and while it's not the worst car out there, it's definitely, there can definitely be some upgrades made. But dating back to 2019, he had an 8th place finish, 14th, 9th, and then 21st in his last race at Darlington, which was his worst finish since the 2018 fall race. So I think there's a little bit of upside here for MDB because he has seemed to run here pretty well. And at the short track aero package for MDB, it doesn't have the worst numbers in the world with an average finish of 14.1, running position of 14th, 5 top 10s and 8 top 15s, and 12 top 20s, which is even more than some drivers like Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, and Kurt Busch. So I'll have a little bit of MDB. Don't think he's a complete fade, but definitely wouldn't go there in cash games because that 8th place starting spot is definitely a bit rough. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. $7,600. I'd rather play him in cash games, even though his numbers at Darlington aren't great by any means. He has finishes of 19th, 25th, 40th, and that 40th place finish was a funny story because that was the first race NASCAR restarted with on May 17th after we had that month or so break from COVID. Ricky Stenhouse, we were all making the joke where if anyone's going to wreck because we didn't have any practice and we were thinking everyone's going to wreck in turn one, we were all saying if anyone's going to wreck, it's going to be Stenhouse. And what do you know? First lap, I think it was the first turn. I'm pretty sure it was, but I know it was the first lap for sure. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. wrecks into the wall and ends up being done. It says he couldn't have made it up any better. But I still like Stenhouse starting 28th. Overall, I know he didn't have a great race last week, but overall, he has been very solid this season in like a top 15, top 20 machine for the most part. And while his numbers aren't great, at Darlington, steep tracks are actually one of his best track types. And I feel like he's due for some good finishes here at Darlington. So starting back in 28th, the price isn't terrible. I can definitely get behind some Stenhouse this week. I also think he's cash viable as well because of that starting spot. Austin Dillon, $7,500. He's starting in 9th. I actually think he's worth playing a little bit. He has an average finish of 10.5 here. 30 DraftKings points per race, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, 4 top 15s. Kind of a similar play to MDB where he's starting so close to the front, it's hard to trust him. You definitely won't go there in cash games, but he did have a second place finisher in the last race at Darlington, and overall his finishes aren't too bad here. I know he had that 20th place finish in the second race at Darlington last year, but 11th, 10th, 16th, and 4th. So I can get behind some Austin Dillon here. I don't think he's really that bad of a play whatsoever. I mean, it's a risky play starting in 9th, but I do think he is viable. Tyler Reddick, $7,400. He's starting in 10th. Tracks where you can run up near the wall, which gives you the most speed, or tracks that I like to roster Tyler Reddick at, like Homestead. Pretty much his best track. He finished second here early in the season. Then he had another top 5 finish last year at Homestead. And while I think Homestead's a decently similar track to Darlington, it's going to be a different aero package this time around. So again, it's kind of confusing with that because it's kind of hard to make comparisons too much. But Tyler Reddick should be a decent tournament play this weekend, starting 10th, where he's a very similar play to Austin Dillon MDB. I think he's got some sneaky top 10 upside here, and he did finish 7th last year in the first Darlington race, so I don't hate Tyler Reddick. Similar track types, he's averaging 47.3 DraftKings points per race with 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and 6 top 15s. Now, Homestead's kind of carrying him in those categories because it does include that in the track type form, but I don't hate having a little bit of Tyler Reddick in tournaments this weekend. And then dropping that to Ryan Newman here, $7,200 starting in 20th. I actually think he's an okay play, starting 10 spots further back than Tyler Reddick, and he actually has some decent numbers here at Darlington. I realize he's never the most exciting play, the most vanilla play in the world because he's typically a 15th to 20th place guy, but at this price point, starting in 20th, if he can get closer to the 15th place finish than the 20th, I actually don't think he's a terrible play. His numbers at Darlington aren't terrible. 15.5 average finish, which is right on par with his running position. Looking at his numbers last year, was kind of around 15th place once again. It finishes of 15th, 14th, and 15th. Like I say, guys, he is just the most vanilla, boring play in the world, but sometimes boring is good down here because a lot of these guys can be a bit sporadic. So if I can just get a nice boring 15th place finish out of Ryan Newman, that's not the worst thing in the world. It's $7,200. Cole Custer, $7,100. His finishes last year at Darlington were 12th, 31st, and 22nd. It's been hard to trust the Stewart Haas racing cars this year. Cole Custer just hasn't really not been that good. Starting 24th, though, I'll probably play some because there's not a lot of good place differential plays down low this week. Like Suarez is 15th, Buescher is 11th, Chastain's 18th, McDowell's 13th. So unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to play some of these guys like Newman, Cole Custer, and Bud Wallace just to get some place differential down low. So Custer's fine just for that, but I really don't have any high hopes for Custer. For looking at how he's performed in this aero package since last season, which is really the only data we have on Custer because he was a rookie last season. Running position inside the top 20, 3 top 10s, and 6 top 15s. Not that bad. So I don't think Custer's a bad play. I just wish he was a little bit cheaper because it's been hard to trust him this season. Bubba Wallace, $7,000. Talking about a driver that's been hard to trust this year. He's been pretty terrible. I think he's got an average finish right outside the top 20, which is what I'm sure Michael Jordan was not expecting this season. So, I mean, it's been tough to play Bubba. He just doesn't perform every week, and you think he should be because he's kind of in that extension of a Joe Gibbs car. I would say kind of similar to Wood Brothers with Penske. I mean, you'd expect better numbers from Bubba, but starting 23rd, I think you can play him just because he's got top 15 upside with the car he's in. I think we all know that he just has not been driving that well. He seems to get some bad luck every single week. Sometimes it's out of his power, but starting 23rd with a lack of place differential options down low, I'll have some Bubba just because of that, but that's the only reason why. Chase Briscoe is $6,800. He's starting 22nd. I mean, he hasn't been great either this season, which sucks because all these guys that are cheapish, I should say, and actually offer some place differential upside, they've been some of the drivers that have been very hard to trust this season. So it's going to be some uncomfortable decisions on DraftKings this week, but starting 22nd, if he can finish like around 20th, 21st place, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world if he doesn't lose us like 5 spots, which guys like Suarez and Busher could certainly do that, and so could Michael McDowell. I'll have a little bit of Briscoe, but it's only because there's a lack of place differential plays down low this week, because for the most part, the guy's been sitting around 20th place, and if we look at his numbers in this aero package this season, small sample size because he's a rookie, so we don't have much to look off of, but average finish of 23.7, running position of 22nd, drive rating 55, 0 top 20s. It's been bad for Chase Briscoe, and I can't imagine a super strong race here. So the only reason you're playing him is because of the lack of place differential plays down low this week. Daniel Suarez, $6,700. He's starting in 15th. I want to play him, but starting 15th, I feel like that's kind of his upside, around a 15th place finish. If he finishes 15th, I think Suarez would be very happy this week. So I mean, maybe a little bit if he can hold his position, but that's the only reason why. I can't play him in cash games. He's starting too far up front for me. Same goes with Chris Buescher. This is on a terrible track for him. He does have a couple top 15s and a few top 20s. The problem is he's starting in 11th place, so you're gonna have to hope he holds his ground and finishes like in the top 12, which is possible for Chris Buescher. We have seen that this season, but it's a very risky bet to take because I just feel like he's gonna finish outside the top 15. Last year, he finished 32nd, 23rd, and 26th. Not saying he's going to finish that bad this year. It seems like he's had a pretty solid car this season, but I think it'd be pretty likely if he finished outside the top 15 on Sunday. So another very risky play there, but I will have a little bit just because of the lack of plays down low. Ross Chastain, $6,300. He's starting in 18th, and I actually think he's a interesting play. And I always say this, so it's going to sound like a broken record, but he is in the car that Kyle Larson used to be in that was very good here at Darlington, and I think Ross Chastain can have a decent day here. He's been fine here in the Xfinity Series, and he's an aggressive driver, so you always have to be a little bit careful there because, aggressiveness at Darlington, you can easily earn your stripes on the wall there. But if he can stay clean, $6,300, I know he's not a great place differential play, but he's got top 15 upside here, and he has more place differential upside than guys like Suarez, Busher, and McDowell, so that's the one positive. So I could see him actually picking up some ownership down low this weekend, so I don't hate Chastain for cheap. Michael McDowell, $6,100. He could be a bit of a sneaky play at Darlington because he's typically in the top 20, as you can see. 4 top 20 finishes here, but the problem is he's starting 13th, so even if he finishes like 15th or 16th, while that's usually good for Michael McDowell, it's not going to be great for fantasy purposes because he's starting all the way up front in 13th. So you're going to need him to finish inside the top 15, which is possible, but it's going to be a pretty risky play. Last season, he did finish 16th and 17th here, so it's possible, but it's definitely going to be a bit of a risky play starting all the way up front in 13, so be careful with Michael McDowell. And then after that, it gets a bit rough in this 5K range. I feel like Ryan Preece is going to be the chalk cheap driver, and I think it makes plenty of sense. He's starting all the way back in 29, $5,900. He does have 2 top 20 finishes here. Average running position of 23.1, average finish of 24.5, finishes of 17th, 20th, and 22nd. I would take that all day below $6,000 if he can let us fit in our dominators like Kyle Larson, Truex, Hamlin this week. So I had no issues with Ryan Preece. If you're looking at how he's performed in this aero package, he's got 6 top 20 finishes, 2 top 15s, and 1 top 10. So actually really not that bad. He's got more top 20 finishes than Michael McDowell does, and he's starting, 16 spots further back. If I'm doing quick now, I think I'm not doing the math right. Maybe 17 or 18 spots further back. Either way, I like Ryan Preece a lot. I think he's your cash game cheap driver. Corey LaJoie is viable. It's just the 7 car has been terrible. I really thought it would be a lot better this season, but it's been bad, so I don't really have a lot of high hopes for Corey LaJoie. But starting back in 30th, if you just want to pivot off of Preece chalk, you could go with LaJoie. I don't think it's a terrible play. Last year, he had finishes of 37th, 24th, and 31st, so not pretty in the 7 car. I feel like it's been worse than the 32 car for Go Fast Racing. Justin Haley, $5,500, starting 31st. You could look at him a little bit. The 77 car is not as bad as cars like Davis and Balicki's in. But even then, he's probably going to finish close to where he's starting. In this aero package, 32.1 running position, 32.3 finish. Again, it's not great, so I really wouldn't want to go below Corey LaJoie, especially if you're playing like single entries or cash games. Anthony Alfredo, I just can't do it. Like, starting 25th, he'll probably finish a little bit worse than that. Looking at his numbers this season, it's small sample size, but 31.7 average finish, or running position, I should say, and a 31.3 average finish with 0 top 20s with a drive rating of 37.2, which is right on par with guys like Justin Haley, Davison, and Balicki, and they're starting further back. So I feel like I'd almost rather want to play them because at least offer us a little bit of place differential upside. But no, it's just really gross when to play Alfredo because the Pasta Man's just been. It's hard to trust the Pasta Man. It is certainly true. And then after that, you're just getting to the absolute scrub group of drivers like Davison, Balicki, Yaley, McLeod, Cody Ware, Quinn Houff. Maybe McLeod might be the best option between these guys because I feel like he can pick up the best finish, but even then, it's just gross down low. The only reason you're playing these guys is if you want to go like triple dom and you want to fit in guys like Larson, Logano, Hamlin together, then maybe you have to play Quinn Houff, which, like projection-wise, Quinn Houff at $4,500, if he can pick up a few spots, he did have an average finish of 31st here last year, finishes of 31st, 26th, and 36th. If he can do that, that's not bad at $4,500 starting in 35th. So if you have to get down to Quinn Houff in tournaments just to make some things work up top, I wouldn't hate maybe a few shares of it, but just don't get your expectations up. But if you could pick up 5 spots, again, that is not the worst thing in the world at $4,500. But with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful. And if you made it all the way through, please let me know down below. You guys are some real troopers if you do make it through the entire 40-some minutes that these videos are. And if you did find it helpful, make sure you leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Patreon content is down below if you want the article, the projections, the optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, Discord community. The list goes on. All that fun stuff. Link is down below for that if you do want to join the community and become a member with several hundred other people. And you can follow me over on social media, Pennell16 on Twitter, and CPen16 over on IG. I should have some fun pictures to post this weekend and the next upcoming week, so check those out if you want. But I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I'll see you guys on the live stream around 2 p.m. on Sunday, and I wish you guys the most wonderful weekends, and I hope the weather is wonderful wherever you are.